welcomed Chief Leader Shin Hojung, and he's going to discuss Korea's industries, readiness, and challenges for the implementation of DPP. Please welcome him with a big round of applause. Good afternoon. I am Shin Hojung from the Korea National Clean Air Production Center at the KITECH. I'm very pleased to be here, and I now also appreciate the opportunity to present today at the Korea EU Ecodesign Forum policy session on the topic of Korea's industry readiness and challenges for the implementation of DPP. So these are the contents that I prepared. First of all, I'd like to share the global trends in the promotion of DPP. Secondly, I will introduce the Korea's government's strategies and the current preparedness or readiness for the DPP implementation. And thirdly, I will also address the key challenges and implementations required for the Korean industries in responding to DPP. Lastly, I will also then propose how Korea and EU can cooperate and suggest key topics for future discussions. First, I'll examine the EU's requirements and the current preparedness of other major countries. As many of our speakers touched upon, the ESPR and DPP, I'm sure that some of you are not familiar with ESPR and DPP, so I'd like to touch upon once again the ESPR is to have circularity and recyclability. It is to improve circularity and recyclability and durability and energy performance of products. The DPP can be understood in simple terms as a kind of digital identity card for products, components, and materials. It's like a digital ID. So these are the two key concepts, and that will help you understand better to understand this topic. So if you look at these slides, the EU's DPP requirements are highly technical and detailed. Yes, if you look at the specifically interoperability, access rights, management of data integrity and security, there are some the terms that you feel unfamiliar. But if you look at the slides, this can present a crisis, but also a opportunity for Korean industries. At the bottom of the slide, the color coding represents I'd like to touch upon this. If you look at the title, it says designed to create shared value across the supply chain. And this was highlighted and presented in 2022. When I was first started my work, and this is what I organized. If you look at that from the extraction of the resources and for all these actors in the stakeholders in the process, this is where that we can create new values. So DPP was presented in that spirit. And I have some comments for the Korean participants. If you think about the DPP, you might feel that this is something difficult regulation that we should comply with. But what we really think about is it really a high time for adopt DPP. Then let's look at what other companies other nations are doing, and you can see that all other countries have the unique characteristics. The EU has a central register system or mandatory DPP rules. And you might see that this is private-led, but they seem to have a strong measures. But in contrast, in China, they have more focus on conformity assessment and custom traceability and mutual recognition. And if you look at Japan, Japan appears to be approaching DPP through voluntary guidelines issued by corporate leadership. From the perspective of SME burden reduction and the development of a national platform. So it appears to be more like a guidelines. If you look at the U.S., since there has been taken a market-led approach, they're relying on industry self-regulation. What's important here is that these differences reflect the industrial structures and characteristics of each country, and therefore we should consider how the Korea also must recognize the global diversity in their approaches to develop in consideration of specific characteristics of our industrial supply chains and the principle of data sovereignty. And I have 3 questions. In ESPR, it can be both a challenge and a crisis. Then my first question is how can we turn compliance into advantage or opportunity? That's my first question. And my key second question is that we have so many stakeholders and the trust and efficiency and sustainability are key elements. Then how can we enable effective data sharing among stakeholders? Number 3 is considering the unique industrial and governance structure. Then what is our tailored strategy? This tailored strategy for our industrial structure for Korea. These are 3 main questions. Therefore, the EU's requirements and all the stakeholders, what kind of incentives we can give and how we can best reflect the Korean industrial structure. And these are the points that I like to discuss. And then let me turn to how Korea is responding to DPP. If you look at this presentation was disclosed by the MOTIE, Ministry of Trade and Industry and Energy, and there are 5 major strategies, and there's one of them is the DPP, creating data platform. That's the first one. And through these strategies, the strategies that we have, our focus is rather than a regulatory regime, how to promote our enterprises to have a better competitiveness. So as for the DPP platform, at the core of the Korea's data platform strategy, if you see on the right, we have Gaia-X and Catena-X or Uranus ecosystems. These are the systems other countries are operating to ensure interoperability. What's critical here is on the left. First, the corporate information flows. The big question is how we can ensure data sovereignty, and we have in the middle SaaS and system integration. That way we can create new industry, and how to promote industry is one area that we should work on. So I just touched upon Korea's strategies. So these Korea's strategies are not only simply a declaration. We had 3 stages. First one is the preparation. We selected 5 key industries: battery, auto, electronics, and steel, aluminum, and textile. And we will carry out the pilot test, and starting from the building stage, we'll be more specific and focusing on improvement of SaaS standards and R&D process. And lastly, in the operation stage, we are working on these verification of platform data And if you look at the slide, if you think about DPP, my personal view is that it's not something that can be done by only one organization. It requires a setting up a task force, like cross-functional and cross-ministerial effort. As presented before, this also requires international collaboration. That's equally important. Then let me now turn to more practical elements. I'd like to take two examples. These are the examples funded by Korean government. The first one is the DPP Data Space Guidelines. This is a preliminary study, and we have 3 stages. First of all, we start with foundational analysis for data space design. Secondly, we design advanced the component and definition for data space, defining technical elements. And lastly, we pursue optimal model design and roadmap for data space. And on the right, this is R&D task. In terms of R&D, we divide it into measuring and reporting and carbon emission reduction. In measuring stage, what's critical is to establish accurate, reliable measurement systems supporting industrial carbon management. In the reporting stage, for both domestic and overseas, we need to build interoperable data exchange infrastructure. For reporting and verification, for us, we need to reduce carbon emissions, so it has to be integrated with carbon emission efforts as well. And in this process, industry and government collaboration should be pursued in the most efficient way, and that is one way we can come up with a solution. So I just shared how we have been preparing. But of course, this is not the magic bullet. Of course not. And we do have a lot of challenges we are facing. And I'd like to touch upon 3 major challenges. First question is, we do have some barriers specific to Korean structure. If you look at these 5 major sectors, these are very complex sectors. If you look at steel, they have intermediate materials. And if you look at automotive, we have close to more than 20,000 parts. And if you think about TPP, we should respond to the not only finished products, but also intermediate products as well. And that makes me wonder, then in the steel, it's an intermediate. And if we have a QR, how about any possibilities the QR can get damaged in the process? So in each sector, there are some complexity that needs to be considered. Then how we can share data interoperability in an interoperable way, that we can exchange data across different sectors. And I think in that respect, I believe that battery, textile, and electric and electronics sessions are to be held separately, and they will have more detailed discussions. And another barrier that's specific to Korea is the cost and data sovereignty. As we conduct all these R&D efforts and work with SMEs, the invariable feedback we receive is that it's very costly. And they are very sensitive about the data because there are some confidentiality involved. So data sovereignty is one element too. Other than solving data sovereignty, we should, at the same time, if we can adopt all these regulations from other countries, that run risk of losing our data sovereignty. Therefore, I believe that just like ESG, when we submit all this data, how we can incentivize the actors or enterprises who should submit data. If you look at the solutions, what the government can do is limited. Actually, the private sector has a bigger role to play. And in terms of DPP, government and the public sector and private sector should work together. And that's the one way that we can solve these issues. Lastly, what I'd like to highlight here is that on the topic of DPP, we need to really take a balanced approach. DPP is very much focused on the technical aspect, but we shouldn't forget that many people just lose sight of the original intent behind it. DPP is to ensure data sovereignty while sharing across the entire product life cycle, and then in the process we can create value added value. However, current focus has been placed on the burden on the manufacturers. For us to implement eco-design, ultimately, this should be linked to consumer behaviors. Consumer need all the information, and the producers should have all the information, and producers should be aware of that. If you look at the fourth column, if you look at the requirement of the eco-design, the user's data can be only become available when the users consent to use of data. At the end of the day, through the eco-design, the key topic of today's event, circular economy, runs across not only producers but all other actors, consumers, and it also encompasses other elements such as circular economy. So lastly, I like to talk about how then going forward Korea and EU can cooperate and what kind of work that needs to be done. Then why Korea and EU should cooperate. My personal view is that our supply chain is interlinked. If you look at these 5 major sectors, these are the part of EU supply chain. Especially the Korean economy, Korean structure economy plays a big role in that. What we need to consider is that whether ESPR or DPP, do we simply comply with this because we export products to EU? Not so, because we are deeply integrated in the process of supply chain. So this requires tight collaboration between EU and Korea. Then what needs to be discussed between 2 parties? These are the key questions, and I gave you the overview of these challenges and the preparedness. I think going forward, we should focus more on what kind of issues should be addressed and who should be involved, and how we can implement solutions in more concrete terms. The first question is exactly which areas we should collaborate. I believe that the EU also have some cost burden, just like we do have some burdens imposed on our SMEs. And that's why the joint recognition should be considered in parallel. And lastly, the message I'd like to convey is that in order for us to contribute to the discussion of this circular economy, I think this is the starting point so that it can be the spark of the global cooperation. This concludes my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
고맙습니다. EU와 한국과 협력할 수 있는 방안과
Thank you, Mr. Shin, from the chief leader of the KITECH. Thank you for your very insightful presentation.